Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I'm hoping you guys are all having a fantastic day. So in today's video, we'll be talking yet again about this upcoming big pattern change. Now, this includes a potentially nasty little storm system that could be bringing a decent amount of snow into southern Canada, followed by a big fall blast of cold air that will be bringing many widespread freezes and frosts to a good portion of the United States. And elsewhere, even if it doesn't bring frost and freezes, it will be bringing most likely the coolest temperatures of the fall season thus far. This includes really anywhere east of the Rockies, as the West may not necessarily get impacted by this. But as you can tell by the thumbnail, I mentioned that this could actually be a lot bigger and long-lasting than expected. And what I mean by that is that basically this pattern change, this initial cool blast, will be pretty much as predicted beforehand. It will have, its consequences and its impacts, but after that, it seems as if the pattern may become a lot more conducive to these major blasts. And basically, there could be just one after the other, after the other. So, in other words, basically, this could be viewed as a larger pattern change, not just one singular one that, lasts for a few days, but one that kind of upends the whole pattern that we've been seeing and begins a new one. So, let me start showing you this by first looking at the European model. A really good model. It's one that, is often looked at. Right now, we don't have much going on across the United States aside from a tropical storm, the remnants of Hurricane Ian, Tropical Storm Ian, Tropical Depression, right? Ian, right? And I don't know if it's named at this point. I don't think it is. But it's the remnants of it. It's bringing quite a bit of decent rain across the Northeast. It will continue to do so. There will be some heavy rain that occurs. I mean, that will be continuing there for several days. So if you take a look at some of these accumulated amounts, there could be, well over to 2, even 5 inches of rain across areas like New York City, Long Island, and New Jersey. So that's definitely something to note of. Elsewhere, there's going to be some activity across the West. You can see some monsoons type activity, though pretty darn late into the season. This year, the monsoons have been absolutely incredible. The amounts of moisture they brought to certain areas, I think it was record years for some. But what we're looking for is basically a low pressure here that starts to interact with the cold front. And notice that when it does that, it starts showing that cold front late Wednesday. So again, this timing from my previous videos, when I was talking about, really hasn't changed much. Do note that this cold front does barge through and brings in a nice blast of chilly air again, right? And you can't really see this on here because it's not frozen, it's not, it doesn't distinguish between the precipitation type, this European model here. It just shows you the precipitation rate. But basically, there's going to be a bit of snow on the northern side of this, including potentially just north of Lake Superior, maybe even some grapple forming across, the UP itself. But even if that doesn't bring the snow, there's going to be lake effect that occurs after this, and that will come in the form of rain for some areas, like the southern lakes. But for the northern ones, that could definitely include just downright snow, or even just some grapple kind of, melted snowflakes and whatnot. So that is that. You can see this cool blast into Friday. I'll go over the specifics in just a little bit, but I want to show you more specifically what this could be followed by. So that blast moves out, and seemingly, it's over. It's done. The temperatures warm back up. There's a high pressure in charge, sending a lot of winds to the north, or from the south to the north. And yes, it will warm up, and you can see this is this upcoming Sunday, so it all occurs pretty quickly. But what the European has been showing, and yesterday I was talking about this in detail, about how it's kind of the battle of the models, right? The European was the one that's more consistent, and that's the one I favored, and today it continues to show what it shows, the European, and this is what it shows. So notice warm pattern, right? We have quite a bit of moisture that kind of on goes. Because of the strong southerly winds, a lot of moisture gets pumped up, and we see a very strong storm across southern Canada. Or northern Canada, we can't really see it. All we see is this cold front, and it brings in a lot of chilly air potentially on Wednesday. You can see right there. This is now pretty far out, but the model has been darn consistent about this, and models like the GFS that have been less consistent are now starting to show this as well more consistently, which leads me to believe that the trend is in the favor of the European model. And look, what it starts showing is pretty something remarkable. We see a lot bigger of a cold blast than what we're going to be seeing this upcoming weekend, or end of the weekend into the United States. This one has a pretty strong storm system associated. Earlier, it was showing a snowstorm, a full-fledged one. That's a possibility, but you can see this extends way further south than the other models. Than the previous storm, cool blast. A little bit of mix up there. And notice that, I mean, this has a lot more impacts potentially. So we'll have to keep an eye out for this, but this is what I'm saying, that why this could be, a lot more impactful. And I'll show you the GFS, which goes out even further. And what it shows this first one, shows the second one, which is right here, and then it shows more and more and more after that. So we'll have to wait and see. But what I'm getting at is that there's a sign across the models that there could be more of a prolonged weather pattern than we previously thought with regards to this cool air and these cool weather, cool air blasts. So let's take a look at the 2 meter temperature shaded. So this gives us the I guess the Fahrenheit reading, right? And well, actually, just to visualize this better for you guys, I want to show you the actual anomaly. So this is basically a temperature graph that shows you where the temperatures are below average or above average for that given time of the year. You may be wondering, okay, how do I know the exact average temperature for my area? Just kind of ballpark it, right? You live in Milwaukee, it's early October, you usually know what that feels like. 50s, upper 50s, maybe some lower 60s. Somewhere in that area. So if you have the blue colors over you, you could expect, the maybe mid 50s or lower 50s. And if you have those orange colors, expect warmer 60s, maybe mid 60s, even 70s in some instances, right? So notice that this upcoming week, into Tuesday, Wednesday, the early part of the week, it's going to be warm for a lot of these areas. So you're going to be expecting, you're going to walk outside, it's going to be gorgeous, beautiful fall days, right? And after that, on Wednesday night, it starts moving into the northern United States, the cold air, and southern Canada. This thing spreads quickly. You can see the anomaly is pretty significant, and this is why there could be a lot of freezes and frosts for a lot of these areas. I'll just play through this quickly because I just want to demonstrate to you, visualize the cool air. Notice the west stays warm, which is why I mentioned at the beginning of the video, anywhere east of the Rockies, and then you can see it warms back up, and I do believe that's going to be the case. But look, just a few days later, we see a cold blast of air. I mean, one that could really be cold. It taps into more of the mountain cold, taps into more of the country that hasn't been infected by that first cold wave, and basically, in other words, it looks very impactful. And you can see out ahead of it, we have this very warm air, this distinct cold front that gives us a look at potentially a very impactful and powerful storm system that's going to develop because these two cold air masses are really going at it. And remember, in my fall outlook, I predicted that we're going to be looking at these type of scenarios where we have these conflicting air masses, one that's very warm, one that's cold, which could lead to some nasty storms. I did think this was going to take a bit longer, maybe early November, for this to start occurring, so I was wrong about the timing if this were to occur, earlier on. But I guess the general basis, the general pattern remains the same. So let's take a look now at the 2 meter temperature shaded. So for those that are across the Midwest and Northeast, or just really anywhere, and want to know what this cool fall blast will do to you, or if you're on the West, how warm will it get? So let's go through this first part of the week. Again, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, really no part of the United States, excluding the Northeast here, is going to be chilly or, dealing with anything incredible. Obviously, the rain across Northeast with Tropical Storm Ian, its remnants, I should say. That's going to be occurring there. Notice the daytime highs for a lot of these areas are going to be nice. I'm just going to kind of go through this. So this is your daytime high for tomorrow. Just pick your location and find it. You can see Northeast is chilly, but all the way up to the Canadian-U.S. border is warm, 60s, even some 70s. Notice through the night Wednesday, again, no real threat of a frost. Tuesday night into Wednesday, there's going to be no real frost. The real concern starts appearing late Wednesday into Thursday for the northern states, and this is where Minnesota, North Dakota starts getting into those frost areas. You can see elsewhere, not really concerned yet. Notice Minneapolis, you don't get above the 50s on Thursday. It's gonna be a chilly day. Elsewhere, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, still a very nice day on Thursday. Now Thursday night into Friday, the northern locations of this kind of warm zone, Milwaukee, Des Moines, Chicago, maybe even Detroit, getting in towards those cooler temperatures. No frosts yet, but definitely in some areas, and I mean no frost yet regarding the areas I mentioned, the big cities, but further north, the Dakotas, into Minnesota, to Wisconsin, you're going to be dealing with frosty, even some just downright freezes. Notice elsewhere, though, 40s, 50s, Northeast still pretty warm. And then by late Friday, so this is, I guess, Friday during the day, you can see a lot of cities here. Detroit, 48, I mean, it's going to feel chilly. Indianapolis, you're right on the cusp between, like, maybe some lower 60s to or upper 50s. Again, pretty cool. You can see that Friday into Saturday is really where a lot of locations are going to be seeing their first frost of the year. You can see a lot of Ohio, a lot of Michigan, a lot of Illinois, potentially getting into some pretty nasty cold for this time of the year. Again, I would say freezes and frost are honestly very likely. I'm already seeing the National Weather Service forecast for northern Illinois here near Rockford for Friday night and putting it at 27. So that's what I mean. A lot of these models sometimes underestimate this cold. But yeah, anywhere you see that kind of lighter shade of this green mixed with a little bit of blue, that's pretty much going to be frosty areas. And then notice that it does start warming up for the plains pretty quickly, but this continues into areas now more like Indiana. Notice central Indiana, northern Indiana, you're in the mid-30s there. Again, based on the look of this, I would probably say this is going to be your biggest threat day for any crops that you have. You can see Ohio, Pennsylvania, upstate New York, Michigan, southern Canada. Though southeast, further north you go, north and east, it gets a bit warmer, but Toronto, you're definitely in that frost zone. And notice that moves out during the day. We do see a slight rebound, and still another day potentially frost across the Pennsylvania, maybe Virginia, West Virginia, Northern Virginia, I should say, and upstate New England. Then after that, we do see that warm up, and that maintains its truth with most of the other models. But look, the second cooldown could be a lot more aggressive. You can see a lot more cold air with this one. And yeah, if you didn't get a first frost around, the first time, you'll probably get one with the second blast, and you could just see the cold air just zooming across the country with that potential cold blast. So let's take a look at the GFS. I'm not going to go in as much detail as I did with the European. I just want to show you that the general outline of the first cool blast is very, very similar to what the European shows. Pretty strong anomalies. You could see, again, expansive. You could see a lot of the southern United States also gets in on some cooler weather, or at least normal weather, meaning that it won't be really warmer than average. That doesn't last too long. You can see a lot of areas warm up real quickly, including the Northwest, southern Canada, the Midwest, right? So this is potentially that fuel for that big storm that could occur, and you can see the GFS, just like the European shows, have pretty strong cold blast that is, again, a lot more expansive. And here's the interesting thing. This cold air is followed by another cool blast, right? So the GFS really starts going in with this cool air, and it shows another one. So that's what I mean. Potentially we could be looking at a pattern that is more prolonged once this kind of system starts. It's going to be hard to, I guess, kick out some of these fall blasts. So again, there's that first one. There's that little snow side to that storm system. Again, lake effect will be prevalent across the Great Lakes, especially on the day Friday. Notice this thing curls up into a pretty nasty storm. Could bring a little bit of snow into New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine as it moves off into the kind of New Labrador, Newfoundland area. Again, after this, we will see a warm-up. You can see a lot of moisture, a lot of warm air, a lot of rain streaming out ahead of this. Potentially, we will see a pretty nasty storm develop. You can see the GFS doesn't quite do that. Again, we'll have to wait and see whether or not the European is more right or the GFS. But notice that we do see a very, very chilly blast of cool air moving through. Coast through, right? We see potentially another warm-up. But then we see another cool blast with another potentially large storm system. So the GFS goes out further and shows us that, well, maybe the cold air will be quite a bit more prevalent. European, we can't see that yet because it only takes us out to 240 hours. So that is that. I want to show you the Canadian model. This is a decent model. I like to look at it, but really, if it shows something that's completely different from the European or GFS, it usually means that it's probably not really gonna happen because this model is just not as accurate as those. But notice it showed that first cool blast of air right there. If I go back, right there's that little storm system, very similar timing and pretty much the same type of temperatures for the rest of the for the whole area, compared to what the other models showed. And notice that it does show a warm up, right? And regarding that second cool wave of air, it struggles. It doesn't really show much. It shows some right there. You can see skirming, kind of, scraping portions of the northern United States and northeast. Again, not out of the question that this does happen, but with the consistency of the European and now the agreeance of the GFS with it, I don't think the Canadian really has a good handle of this. We'll have to keep an eye on it for sure, though. And do note that as I click on the ensembles, so like the GEFS, which is basically a lot of models combined, set together. This gives us a good look at what may happen without, looking at a bunch of individual models. And, the further you go out and the more agreements that they have, this is a pretty distinct feature, right? That's most likely going to happen if the ensembles have such confidence on that. You can see the anomalies are, again, pretty significant, most likely first frosts. I do want to mention, this isn't going to be cool for everyone. The West, Oregon, Nevada, Idaho, Utah, Colorado, you're going to be warm, especially with the southwestern Canada as well. Very, very warm, so that's not really going to affect you. Now, you can see that the GEFS ensembles do show that second blast. They have lesser confidence on it because I'm guaranteeing you that there's some models that don't show show this cool blast. But overall, the trend in the past 24 hours have been towards a resounding yes with this second blast. Notice, if this were to occur, I guarantee you that the anomaly would be stronger. It's just the fact that probably some are showing a completely different pattern at this point. And in the future, you can see that while the warm air does start rebounding, those aren't deep oranges and those blues kind of mix in, meaning that the confidence is low as what will happen. But definitely, the prevalence of cooler air may be with us for a while. Looking at the EPS, so these are European ensemble models. So these go out to 384, unlike the European, which just only goes out to 240. There's that first blast of cool air. Again, they have pretty good agreement with that. There's that warm-up, potential storm system, and you can see that they don't really show that distinct drop from the north. They just kind of plop this warm or cool air up here, but that's where it would come from, the north, obviously, as that would be the driving force of this. So they do show that, those cool weather features. So there is an agreement with the EPS on that cool air, just maybe not as strong as with what there is with the GEFS ensembles, which is interesting because the GFS was the one that was less consistent and the European was more consistent. So that's definitely interesting. And notice that they do kind of show a bouncing back and forth, indicating they don't really know precisely what will happen beyond that first or second cool wave. GFS, I want to take a look at the GFS and just show you the models from the morning and noon hours to show you that there has been more consistency with the GFS. There's that first cool blast. There's that warm up with that strong high pressure. There's that second one. You can see it shows it a little bit differently than what it shows now, though it definitely shows that feature develops some sort of a snowstorm across the Rockies. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily bring a giant blast of cold air with it, but more maybe smaller localized ones with a storm system, and then later on it kind of brings in some sort of a cool feature. So that was today in the morning. Definitely still, though, more cool bias than it was yesterday. And then this is today at noon, so you can see there's that first cool wave. I don't think much will change with that. It's already pretty not that far out. And there's that second wave. You can see not as deep. It's a little bit more shallow. Develops a pretty nasty snowstorm with it, and just kind of continues that pattern of these troughs, but just they don't really go that far south into the United States. And then you can see the most recent one, the evening model one, has been the most similar to the European. And that includes, you can see that big trough of cool air, which the European has been showing for a while, a lot more consistently also than what the GFS has been showing. So I do prefer the European with most regards to this pattern change. And you can see it shows that cool air, shows that snowstorm, shows that warm up, and then shows that second cool wave, which is right there. And you can see yesterday's midnight model run developed some sort of a cold front. It was a bit later with this cold, with this wave. You can see with the most current one, it's quite a bit more ahead at the 240 hour, and not only because it's newer data, but even if you go back to the same time spot, which is 00Z Thursday, it shows a bit more advanced than what it showed at midnight at the same time frame back here. So there's still some changes with the European. It's just that it's a lot more consistent compared to other models. So what this means is, well, basically more cooler air, more first frost, possibly a big first snowstorm for at least some portions of southern Canada and into the northern United States. And yeah, a lot more, I guess, exciting weather, if you will. And if you're to look at the October outlook for the Climate Prediction Center, they do show a little bit of cool air for maybe the Northeast right there, but not really elsewhere. Again, this would be a decent forecast if it was made a few days ago, but based on what the recent models are showing, I would say that, I have less confidence in this than I would. This is still definitely a possible scenario, but I do think that this maybe underestimates the kind of I guess the impact that some of these cool outbreaks will have, or just completely doesn't show that. And it's really hard to predict this. If I were to make a forecast on September 30th for October, within 4 days it would have changed. So that's why these things are sometimes a bit more speculative. And yeah, the precipitation one does seem a bit more accurate, though. Again, even if we do see a lot of big storms with powerful cold fronts, this could quickly also kind of change the outcome here. So that is that. That's basically all I have for you. Oh, I do want to show you some of the high-res models. Right, so this is kind of more high-resolution data that we could look at for the potential first cool down regarding this upcoming weekend. It doesn't take us through it all, right, through the whole process, but it does show it's beginning to impact the northern United States. So notice this is the NAM 12 km into tonight. You could see tomorrow pretty warm for most of the United States. I do want to say that the NAM does have a cool bias. It's been proven through studies that it does have a colder bias, so it usually shows a bit colder than it actually is, but nonetheless it's still a decent model, and I believe that bias has kind of gotten a bit less problematic throughout the years. But notice Thursday into Friday, it really shows a lot of cool weather developing across the United States. Obviously, shows that cool down, and this is only at 1 a.m. So, again, definitely agrees with the other models with that cool down. So that's pretty much it, though. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next episode. See ya. Bye.